Mike Porter had spent 3 years perfecting latte art and forgetting how to kill. The steam wand hissed as he worked, a gentler sound than the rifle reports that once haunted his dreams. Across the street, four masked figures stormed into First National, while Carol, his manager, was making their weekly deposit. Police sirens wailed in the distance, but Mike knew they'd arrived too late. His fingers trembled slightly as muscle memory awakened, calculating angles, wind drift, counting heartbeats. The rooftop access door was unlocked. His old kit remained hidden in his truck. He'd promised himself never again. But promises didn't matter when Carol's life hung in the balance. What he could do in 10 minutes would save lives, but at what cost to the peaceful existence he'd built? Can a man truly bury his past? Or does it simply wait for the moment when the world needs what he's tried so hard to forget? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning light filtered through the large windows of Oak Ridge Coffee, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. Mike Porter arrived at 5:30 a.m., same as every day for the past 3 years. The weight of the keys in his hand felt right, tangible, present, nothing like the phantom weight of a rifle that sometimes visited him in dreams. He moved through his opening routine with practiced efficiency, brewing the first batch of drip coffee, checking inventory, wiping down counters that were already clean. The methodical nature of it soothed him. Order from chaos, control from randomness, principles that had kept him alive in another life. "Morning, Mike." Carol Matthews breezed through the back door at 6:15, exactly on schedule. At 58, Carol ran the coffee shop with maternal efficiency, her silver-streaked hair always pulled back in a neat bun, her smile warm but no nonsense. "Morning, Carol," Mike replied, sliding her usual cup across the counter. "Medium roast, touch of cream, no sugar." "You're up early again," she observed, taking a grateful sip. "You know, most people actually sleep in on their days off." Mike shrugged. Force of habit. What he didn't say was that his apartment felt too quiet, too empty. Here, with the gentle hiss of the espresso machine and the morning light warming the wooden tables, he could almost believe he belonged. Carol never pushed when he deflected. It was one of the things he appreciated most about her. She'd hired him 3 years ago with a sparse resume and no references, asking few questions beyond whether he could start immediately. Something in her eyes told him she recognized a person needing a second chance. The bell above the door chimed at 7:02 a.m. Detective Frank Mercer, retired, arrived with the precision of a man who still lived by the clock despite having nowhere specific to be. "The usual, Frank?" Mike asked, already reaching for the dark roast beans. "You know it, son." Frank settled at his regular corner table, today's newspaper tucked under his arm. His weathered face creased with a smile that never quite reached his eyes, the mark of a man who'd seen too much. Frank took his coffee black and his conversations light, but Mike often caught him watching with the calculated assessment of someone who'd spent 40 years reading people for a living. Whatever Frank suspected about Mike's past, he kept to himself. The morning rush began precisely at 7:30, office workers grabbing to-go cups, college students from the community college needing caffeine before early classes. Mike moved through it all with quiet efficiency, pulling perfect espresso shots, crafting delicate latte art, remembering every regular's order without being asked. It was during a brief lull that the delivery truck backfired outside. The sharp crack sent Mike into an instinctive crouch, his body reacting before his mind could catch up. His heart hammered against his ribs as sweat beaded along his hairline. "You okay there?" Sam Chun, the part-time college student who worked mornings, looked at him with concern. 22, bright-eyed, with a future stretching before him uncomplicated by ghosts. "Fine," Mike straightened, forcing his breathing to normalize. "Just dropped something." Sam didn't push, but Mike felt Frank's eyes on him from the corner table. Later, as he wiped down the counters, a memory surfaced unbidden. The recruitment officer who'd first noticed his steady hands, his attention to detail, his ability to remain perfectly still for hours. "Son, you've got the makings of something special." the officer had said. Mike had been 22 then, same as Sam was now, looking for purpose, for belonging. They'd given him both, along with a skill set few civilians could comprehend. From his position at the counter, Mike had a clear view of First National Bank across the street. He watched as the security guard unlocked the doors at 9 a.m. sharp. Carol would head over there at 10:30 with their weekly deposit and the special order of pastries and coffee for the staff meeting, a tradition she'd maintained for years. In his apartment above a hardware store 6 blocks away, a framed photograph lay face down in his dresser drawer. Mike in uniform, accepting a commendation he'd never displayed. Some accomplishments weren't meant to be remembered. Some skills weren't meant to be used again. Mike Porter had become very good at making coffee and forgetting the past. Most days it was almost enough. Every Tuesday at 4:30 p.m., Mike sat in Dr. Eleanor Hayes' office, perched on the edge of a comfortable chair he never fully relaxed into. The leather-bound journal rested on his knee, its pages filled with his cramped handwriting, observations, triggers, progress measured in small victories. "How have the nightmares been this week?" Dr. Hayes asked, her voice steady and unhurried. At 62, she specialized in veterans with PTSD, her own son having served 2 tours in Afghanistan. 2, maybe 3, Mike answered, always precise. Less intense. And the breathing exercises? They help. Sometimes. What he didn't tell her was how he still woke some nights gasping for air, the desert dust thick in his throat, the weight of his spotter's dead body across his legs. Instead, he talked about the coffee shop, about Carol's maternal concern, about Sam's easy friendship that asked for nothing in return. Dr. Hayes nodded, making a note in her own journal. "You've been at Oak Ridge for 3 years now. That's stability, Mike. That's roots." Roots. Such a simple word for something that felt so complicated. In his former life, attachments were dangerous. Connections were vulnerabilities. Now, they were his lifeline to normalcy. "I met someone," he said unexpectedly, surprising himself with the admission. Dr. Hayes raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to continue. "The bank manager, Diane. She comes in for coffee most mornings." Mike traced the edge of the journal with his thumb. "We've talked a few times." "That's good, Mike. Connection is important." Connection. Another simple word for something terrifyingly complex. The first time Diane Lambert walked into Oak Ridge Coffee, Mike noticed her purposeful stride, the way her eyes scanned the room before settling on the menu. Bank manager habits, he'd thought, always assessing, always aware. Her coffee order was as precise as she was. Medium Ethiopian pour-over, no room for cream. "Perfect," she'd said after her first sip, offering a smile that transformed her professional demeanor into something warmer. "I've been looking for decent coffee since I transferred here." Now she stopped by most mornings, sometimes lingering to chat about books or the changing seasons. Nothing personal, nothing probing. Just normal conversation that slowly became something Mike looked forward to. After his session with Dr. Hayes, Mike walked the long way home, past the town's small park where elderly men played chess and mothers pushed children on swings. Normal life unfolding around him. A world he observed but never quite felt part of. His apartment was Spartan but not empty. A shelf of books, military history, technical manuals, and lately, a growing collection of literary classics recommended by Sam. A decent television he rarely watched. A kitchen with good knives and basic cookware. The bare necessities of civilian life, accumulated with the cautious deliberation of someone and used to permanence. The journal went into its drawer beside the face-down photograph. Mike never wrote in it at home. Some ghosts were best confronted in Dr. Hayes' office, under her watchful, compassionate eye. His phone buzzed with a text from Carol. "Special order for the bank tomorrow. Could use your help with the pastry selection." These small requests, normal, everyday tasks, were anchors tethering him to this new life. He replied quickly, affirming he'd be there early to help. Thursday mornings were always busy. The bank staff meeting meant extra pastry orders and a large coffee delivery that Carol handled personally. Building relationships, she called it, though Mike suspected she enjoyed the weekly excuse to chat with the bank's security guard. a widower named Henry with kind eyes and a ready laugh. That night, sleep came fitfully. In his dreams, a figure in desert camouflage watched him through a rifle scope, patient and unblinking. The figure wore his face, younger and harder, eyes empty of everything except the next target. Mike woke at 3:17 a.m., the sheets twisted around him, his breathing rapid and shallow. He counted backward from 20, focusing on each exhale as Dr. Hayes had taught him. When that didn't work, he reached for the journal, writing by the dim light of his bedside lamp. The past doesn't die. It waits. The next morning, Frank arrived at his usual time, newspaper tucked under his arm. As Mike handed him his coffee, Frank paused. "You ever miss it?" Frank asked quietly. "Miss what?" Mike kept his expression neutral, though his pulse quickened. Whatever it was before coffee. Frank's eyes, sharp despite his age, held Mike's gaze. "I was a detective for 40 years. I know the look of someone who's carried a different kind of weight." Mike hesitated. "Some days," he admitted finally. "Not most." Frank nodded, seemingly satisfied with the small truth. "Some things stay in the blood, son. Doesn't make you less of who you are now." As Frank retreated to his corner table, Mike noticed Diane entering the bank across the street, her posture straight, her stride purposeful. For a moment, their worlds seemed to exist in parallel, each of them carrying responsibilities visible only to those who knew to look. Mike's hands moved with practiced precision as he created an intricate leaf pattern in the latte foam. The morning sun caught the steam rising from the cup, creating a momentary halo of light. Perfect balance, perfect timing, skills that translated surprisingly well from his former life to this one. "That's too pretty to drink," Carol said, sliding a custom ceramic mug across the counter to him. Dark blue with 1 year painted in careful script. "Happy anniversary." Mike stared at the mug, unexpected emotion tightening his throat. 1 year since his probationary period had ended. 3 years since he'd started. The longest he'd stayed anywhere since leaving the military. "Thank you," he managed, taking the mug carefully. Carol squeezed his shoulder. A brief, maternal touch. "You're family now, Mike, whether you like it or not." Family. The word settled strangely in his chest, both welcome and terrifying. The bell chimed as Sam hurried in, slightly late, his backpack bulging with textbooks. "Sorry, Professor Wilson went overtime again." Criminal justice professors should respect the law of punctuality, Carol teased, already preparing the day's first batch of cookies. "Speaking of criminal justice," Sam dropped his voice, leaning toward Mike. "Did you hear about the bank robbery in Westfield? Just 30 miles from here." Mike kept his expression neutral, though his attention sharpened. "No. 3 guys, military precision according to the news. In and out in under 7 minutes." Sam's eyes were bright with the morbid fascination of youth. "No one hurt, thankfully. Probably professionals," Mike said, focusing on wiping down the espresso machine. "Quick, clean jobs mean experienced crews." Sam looked at him curiously. "How would you know that?" Mike shrugged. "True crime podcasts." The lie came easily. Better than explaining how he'd once been part of a team that studied bank robberies to improve military extraction techniques. Better than mentioning he could list 12 ways to breach First National Bank across the street, accounting for security cameras and response times. "The Fall Festival Committee needs our booth designed by Friday," Carol called from the kitchen, changing the subject without realizing it. "Mike, you still good to handle that?" The annual Oak Ridge Fall Festival was the town's biggest event. Local businesses set up booths, musicians played, children got their faces painted. Normal, wholesome, community life. Mike had volunteered to design their coffee booth, applying the same attention to detail he once used for very different purposes. "Already done," he answered. "Just needs your approval." The morning unfolded with its usual rhythm. Regular customers, familiar orders, the comfortable hum of the espresso machine. Around 10, Diane entered, her cream-colored blouse crisp against her dark suit. "The usual?" Mike asked, already reaching for the Ethiopian beans. "Please." Her smile seemed distracted. And could I get an extra shot today? Budget meetings. As he prepared her coffee, Mike noticed a man lingering outside the bank across the street. Something about his posture set off warning bells. The way he studied the building while pretending to check his phone, his careful observation of the security guard's rotation. Diane followed his gaze. Something wrong? No, Mike said quickly. Just daydreaming. When he handed her the coffee, their fingers brushed briefly. The small contact sent an unexpected warmth through him, a reminder of how long it had been since he'd allowed himself any kind of closeness. We should have dinner sometime, Diane said suddenly, surprising them both. I mean, if you'd like to. Mike found himself nodding before he could overthink it. I would. After she left, Sam appeared at his elbow. Smooth operator. I've been watching you two dance around each other for weeks. It's just dinner, Mike muttered, though his pulse had quickened. It's just the beginning, Sam corrected with a knowing grin. Later, as the afternoon lull set in, Frank lingered over his second cup. Newspaper spread across the table. You military, Porter? He asked without looking up. The question hit like a physical blow. Mike kept his face neutral with effort. What makes you ask? The way you scan a room when you enter. The way you never sit with your back to a door. Frank folded his newspaper with deliberate care. The way you noticed that fella casing the bank this morning. Mike froze. I don't know what you're talking about. Son, I spent 4 decades reading people for a living. But don't worry. Your secrets are safe with me. Frank stood, leaving his usual generous tip. Just know that if you ever need to talk, some of us understand the weight of the things we've done in service. After Frank left, Mike found himself automatically checking exit routes, assessing defensive positions, habits he couldn't break even after years of civilian life. His gaze kept returning to the bank, to the man who'd been watching it with too much interest, to the security cameras that covered some angles but left blind spots a professional would notice. Carol, he called toward the kitchen. When's the next bank delivery? Tomorrow morning, she replied. Special order for their new clients. Why? No reason, Mike said, his mind already calculating risks, escape routes, potential scenarios. Just planning my schedule. That night, he dreamed of his last mission. The one that went wrong. The one that sent him seeking a new life, pulling espresso shots instead of triggers. In the dream, he was back on that dusty rooftop, counting his breaths, adjusting for wind. But when he looked through the scope, it wasn't a terrorist leader in the crosshairs. It was Carol, smiling up at him, holding his blue anniversary mug. Thursday morning dawned clear and cool, the kind of perfect autumn day that usually lifted Mike's spirits. He arrived at the coffee shop at his usual time, the weight of his disturbed sleep hanging heavy on his shoulders. Sam was already there, unusually early, setting up the small security monitor Carol had installed last year. The screen showed a grainy view of the shop's entrance and the street beyond, including the front of First National Bank. Morning, Sam yawned. Thought I'd get the new camera angle set up before Carol arrives. Mike nodded, eyeing the monitor with professional assessment. Angle's off. You want a wider view of the street. Sam adjusted it without question, unaware of Mike's internal calculus, the strategic value of visual coverage, the tactical advantages of environmental awareness. These weren't the thoughts of a barista, but old habits died hard. The morning progressed with deceptive normalcy. Regular customers, familiar orders, the comforting ritual of steamed milk and espresso shots. At 10:15, Carol emerged from the kitchen with a large insulated carrier filled with coffee and a box of pastries. Back in 20, she called cheerfully, heading for the door. The bank's quarterly staff meeting. They always order the works. Mike watched her cross the street, a flicker of unease prickling the back of his neck. The suspicious man from yesterday was nowhere to be seen, but something felt off. He scanned the street, the sidewalk, the parked cars, looking for anything out of place. Nothing. 10 minutes passed. The coffee shop was nearly empty. Just a college student in the corner with headphones, typing furiously on a laptop, and an elderly couple sharing a scone by the window. Then everything changed in an instant. On the security monitor, figures in dark clothing and ski masks emerged from a nondescript van that had pulled up to the bank. They moved with practiced coordination, 2 securing the entrance while 2 more swept inside. Professional, military-trained or close to it. Sam. Mike's voice was calm, belying the adrenaline suddenly flooding his system. Call 911. Now. Sam looked up from the register, confused, then followed Mike's gaze to the monitor. His eyes widened. Oh my God. Now, Sam, Mike repeated, already moving toward the window for a better view. His mind was shifting into a different mode, one he hadn't accessed in years but that remained as sharp as ever. Tactical assessment, strategic options, threat evaluation. Through the bank's large front windows, he could see people being herded into the center of the floor. One of the masked figures stood on a desk, gesturing with what was clearly a semi-automatic weapon. Another guarded the door. 2 more moved through the bank with purpose, one heading toward the vault area. Mike's eyes searched for Carol, finding her silver-streaked hair among the hostages. She was kneeling beside an elderly woman who appeared distressed, her arm around the woman's shoulders. Even in danger, Carol's first instinct was to care for others. The distant wail of police sirens penetrated his focused state. First responders, still minutes away. Too slow. They said units are coming. Sam's voice shook as he hung up the phone. They want everyone to clear the area. The college student was already gathering his things, face pale. The elderly couple stood frozen by the window, the woman clutching her husband's arm. Everyone out the back door, Mike directed, his voice taking on a tone of command he hadn't used in years. Sam, help them. Then lock up and go with them. What about you? Sam asked, helping the elderly man with his cane. I'll be right behind you, Mike lied smoothly. Just going to make sure the front is secure. As Sam ushered the customers toward the rear exit, Mike's attention remained fixed on the bank. Through the security monitor, he could now see 2 police cruisers arriving, officers taking position behind their vehicles, weapons drawn. Standard procedure: secure the perimeter, wait for backup, establish communication. He knew the drill. He also knew its limitations. The coffee shop had emptied. Mike should follow protocol, evacuate, let the professionals handle it. That would be the rational decision, the civilian decision. But Carol was in there. His fingers tapped an unconscious rhythm on the counter, the same one he'd used to time his breathing before taking a shot. 1, 2, 3, 4. The tactical options unfolded in his mind with cold clarity. The bank's layout, which he knew from dozens of coffee deliveries. The probable positions of the robbers, based on their initial movements. The police response timeline, which would include negotiators, SWAT, the full apparatus of law enforcement. Too slow. Too cautious. Too many variables. Mike moved to the back of the shop, to his locker where he kept a change of clothes. Behind the spare apron hung a key. Not to his apartment, but to his truck parked in the alley. And in a locked compartment beneath the truck's bed was a duffel bag he'd hoped never to open again. The decision crystallized with the clarity that had once made him exceptional at his former profession. Some skills couldn't be forgotten. Some training never left the blood. Today, the past he'd tried to bury might be the only thing that could save Carol's life. The alley behind Oak Ridge Coffee was empty, the dumpsters casting long shadows in the morning sun. Mike moved with purpose toward his truck, a nondescript 10-year-old Ford that blended in anywhere. Nothing flashy, nothing memorable, just like its owner preferred. Mike! Sam's voice carried from the coffee shop's back door. Police say everyone needs to evacuate the block. Mike turned, his expression carefully composed. I forgot something important in my truck. You go ahead. I'll catch up. Sam hesitated, conflict evident on his young face. They said it's dangerous. It'll just take a minute, Mike assured him, his voice calm and reasonable. The voice he'd once used to steady nervous teammates before an operation. Go on. I'll be right behind you. As Sam reluctantly joined the stream of evacuees, moving toward the police barricade at the end of the block, Mike unlocked his truck. He reached beneath the driver's seat and pressed a hidden latch. The false bottom of the storage compartment popped open, revealing a black duffel bag, dusty from disuse but meticulously maintained. Mike pulled it out, testing its familiar weight. 3 years since he'd last opened it. 3 years of peace, of normalcy, of coffee beans and latte art instead of targets and extraction plans. A police officer was directing people away from the buildings surrounding the bank. Mike slung the duffel over his shoulder and moved casually toward the coffee shop's back entrance, timing his movement to coincide with the officer turning to speak to another evacuee. Inside, the coffee shop was eerily quiet. Through the front windows, Mike could see the growing police presence. Patrol cars forming a perimeter, officers in tactical gear taking position, the first news van arriving on scene. Standard procedure for a hostage situation. Slow, methodical, by the book. Carol didn't have that kind of time. The security monitor still showed the bank's entrance. 2 robbers remained visible, their postures betraying their agitation as they registered the police presence. The leader, Mike had identified him by his gestures and the way the others deferred to him, was speaking into a phone, likely beginning negotiations. Mike unzipped the duffel bag on the counter. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay the tools of his former trade. He removed a compact set of binoculars, far more powerful than their size suggested. Next came a small case containing communication equipment, an encrypted receiver that could pick up police frequencies. Then a slim leather case with precision tools. And finally, wrapped separately, a disassembled rifle with a scope that had cost more than most people's cars. His hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over as he assembled the pieces. Each component locked into place with satisfying precision, the familiar clicks and snaps both comforting and disturbing. How easily the past returned when summoned. A sudden loud voice from outside snapped Mike back to the present. A police negotiator had set up a bullhorn. "This is Chief Hayes of the Oak Ridge Police Department. We have the building surrounded. Release the hostages and come out with your hands up. Standard opening. Establish authority, demonstrate force, offer a simple way out." It almost never worked, but it was the required first step. The robbers' response came quickly, one of them appearing briefly at the window, pointing his weapon at the hostages to make his threat clear before disappearing again. Mike moved to the coffee shop's rear stairwell. Few customers knew that Oak Ridge Coffee had roof access, a small maintenance door that led to an area housing the ventilation systems. Carol had shown it to him during his first week, making sure he knew all the building's exits in case of fire. He never told her he'd already identified and assessed it within his first hour of employment, an ingrained habit from years of always knowing his extraction routes. The stairs creaked slightly under his weight. At the top landing, he set down the duffel bag and removed a small tension wrench and pick from the leather case. The lock was simple. It yielded in seconds. The roof offered a perfect vantage point. From here, he could see the bank's front entrance, its side door, and partially into the main floor through the large windows. More importantly, he had a clear view of the street and the police positions. Chief Hayes stood beside a command vehicle, speaking urgently into a radio. More tactical units were arriving. Soon, the FBI would take over, standard protocol for bank robberies with hostages. Mike set up his position with practiced efficiency, using the roof's HVAC unit as cover. The binoculars gave him a detailed view of the situation inside the bank. He counted 12 hostages, including Carol. 4 robbers, all armed, all moving with the coordination of those who had trained together. Through his receiver, he picked up the police frequencies, listening as they established a perimeter and called for additional resources. Hostage negotiator ETA 15 minutes. Waiting on FBI tactical. Unknown number of perpetrators. Estimated 10 to 15 hostages. Too slow. Too cautious. A flash of memory hit him. Desert heat. A different rooftop. Waiting for authorization that came too late. The mission that had ended his military career and sent him seeking anonymity in a small-town coffee shop. Mike pushed the memory away. This wasn't then. This was now. And Carol needed him. He pulled out a burner phone, another item from his never-quite-discarded past life, and dialed the police department's public number. "This is Oak Ridge Police," a dispatcher answered, voice tense. I need to speak to whoever's in charge of the bank situation, Mike said, his voice deliberately calm and authoritative. I have information that could help. The rangefinder felt both foreign and familiar in Mike's hands. An extension of himself he'd once relied on daily, now almost forgotten. He adjusted it carefully, measuring distances between key points. Coffee shop roof to bank entrance, 42.3 meters. Bank entrance to hostage gathering point, approximately 11.7 meters. Distance to police command post, 63.8 meters. Numbers, calculations, variables. The language of precision that had once defined his existence. Through his high-powered optics, Mike cataloged every detail inside the bank. The 4 robbers maintained strict positions. 1 guarding the front, 1 watching the hostages, 1 presumably at the vault, and the leader coordinating. Their movements betrayed professional training. These weren't desperate amateurs. The hostages sat clustered on the floor, hands zip-tied. An elderly woman appeared to be having trouble breathing. Carol was beside her, speaking calmly, offering what comfort she could despite her own bound hands. Even in crisis, Carol remained Carol. Mike's radio picked up increased chatter as a black SUV pulled up to the police perimeter. FBI on scene, crackled a voice. Agent Sullivan taking command. The arrival of federal agents changed the dynamics. Bank robberies fell under FBI jurisdiction, and their hostage rescue protocols were rigidly standardized. They would establish communication, attempt negotiation, gather intelligence, and prepare tactical options, all while the clock ticked and tensions inside escalated. Too slow, too methodical. Mike's burner phone connected after several transfers. "This is Chief Hayes," came a woman's terse voice. "Who am I speaking with?" "Someone who can help," Mike replied, keeping his voice low and steady. "I have eyes on the interior of the bank from an elevated position. For armed perpetrators, 12 hostages including 1 elderly woman in medical distress." A pause. "How exactly do you have this information?" "That's not important right now," Mike continued. "What matters is that the robbers are using professional tactics, military or paramilitary training. The leader is the one in the gray mask by the teller counter. He's keeping the others on strict movement patterns." Another pause, longer this time. "Sir, I need you to identify yourself and your location." "Chief Hayes," Mike's voice hardened slightly. "In approximately 3 minutes, one of your officers is going to approach the south corner of the bank for a better view. Don't let him. The sight lines from the bank give the robbers clear advantage. He'll be exposed." Even as he spoke, Mike watched a tactical officer in partial gear beginning to edge toward the position he'd just described. 30 seconds passed. Then, through his binoculars, Mike saw Chief Hayes gesture sharply, and the officer retreated. "I'm listening," Hayes said when she returned to the call, her tone markedly different. "The leader is ex-military," Mike continued. "Notice how he maintains position with clear views of both exits while keeping the hostages in a depression point. The others defer to his signals. This isn't their first operation together." "Are you law enforcement?" Hayes asked directly. "No. The truth, technically. Military?" Mike hesitated. "Once." A new voice came on the line. "This is Special Agent Sullivan, FBI. Whoever you are, we appreciate the intelligence, but we need you to stand down. We have protocols for these situations." "Your protocols will get hostages killed," Mike replied bluntly. "The robbers are watching the police deployment. They've already identified your command post and potential breach points. Standard FBI hostage rescue procedures won't work here." Sullivan's voice sharpened. "And you know this how?" "Because it's what I would have done in their position." The line went silent for several seconds. "We're going to need your name and position," Sullivan finally said. "Michael Porter. I'm on the roof of Oak Ridge Coffee across the street." As he spoke, Mike watched a subtle shift in the bank. The leader had moved to a window, observing the police positions. Something in his posture had changed. More tension, more urgency. The robbery wasn't going according to plan. "Mr. Porter, I'm going to need you to come down immediately and..." "They're getting ready to execute a hostage," Mike interrupted, recognizing the signs. The leader just gave a signal to the one watching the hostages. You need to create a distraction. Now. Without waiting for a response, Mike adjusted his position. From his vantage point, he could see what the police couldn't, the robber approaching a young male hostage, weapon raised. Mike picked up a small piece of roofing gravel and calculated angle, distance, and required force in an instant. With practiced precision, he threw it at the bank's metal rain gutter, creating a sharp, pinging sound that echoed in the tense silence. The robber startled, turning toward the noise. The moment of distraction was enough. The police negotiator's voice boomed through the bullhorn again, drawing further attention away from the hostage. "This is a sign of good faith," Mike murmured into the phone. "But you're running out of time. How do you know these things?" Sullivan demanded. "Who exactly were you in the military?" Mike's eyes never left the scene before him as he answered. "Someone who made sure high-risk situations didn't end with civilian casualties." In the distance, he could see Frank Mercer arguing with a police officer at the perimeter, gesturing toward the coffee shop. Their eyes met briefly across the distance, and Frank gave an almost imperceptible nod of recognition. "Your team needs to know," Mike continued, "that the leader is losing control of the situation. The one guarding the back is getting nervous, finger too close to the trigger. And there's someone among the hostages who doesn't fit, the woman in the blue suit. She's too calm, too aware. She might be connected to this." He watched Diane, perfectly composed amid the terror surrounding her, her eyes constantly tracking the robber's movements with analytical precision rather than fear. "We need to run your name," Sullivan said. "Go ahead," Mike replied. "But while you're doing that, hostages are at risk. I can help you end this without casualties." What he didn't say was that his help would come at a cost. The quiet life he'd built for himself, the anonymity he'd cultivated, the peace he'd found in steam wands and latte art instead of scopes and triggers. But some prices were worth paying. Carol's life was one of them. The burner phone became Mike's lifeline to the unfolding operation below. He'd positioned it carefully beside him, speaker mode activated, as his hands remained occupied with the binoculars and rangefinder. Years of operational discipline kept his breathing steady, his movements economical. "We've run your name," Agent Sullivan's voice came through the phone after several minutes. "Nothing comes up in our standard databases." Mike almost smiled. "Try a different clearance level." A pause, then muffled conversation on the other end. He could imagine Sullivan conferring with his team, frustration mounting at the mysterious observer who seemed to know too much. "Porter, I need you to come down from there," Chief Hayes cut in. "This is an active crime scene, and civilians cannot." "He's not a civilian," a new voice interrupted. Frank Mercer's gravelly tone was unmistakable. "Let me talk to him." More muffled discussion. Then, "Mike? It's Frank. They've let me into the command post." "Didn't know you had that kind of pull, Frank," Mike replied, eyes never leaving the bank. 40 years on the force opens doors. Plus, I told them I know who you are." A pause. "Or at least who you were." Mike tensed. "What exactly did you tell them?" "Only that they should listen to you. That I've seen enough men with your particular skill set to recognize one when I see him. That I've been watching you make coffee for 3 years while wondering what someone with your training was doing in a place like Oak Ridge." Through his binoculars, Mike could see Frank standing beside Chief Hayes and a man in an FBI windbreaker, presumably Sullivan. Frank looked up directly toward Mike's position and gave a small nod. "They're running your prints now," Frank continued. "The ones from your employment paperwork at the coffee shop. My guess is they'll find something interesting when they get to the right databases." Mike had known this risk when he made the call. His carefully constructed anonymity sacrificed in an instant. But with Carol's life in the balance, there had been no real choice. "The robbers are getting agitated," Mike said, refocusing on the immediate situation. "The leader's on his phone again. I think your negotiator needs to call now. Keep them engaged." Sullivan's voice returned. "We're handling this by protocol, Porter. I don't know what your background is, but Classified Operations, 2nd Marine Raider Battalion, later attached to Joint Special Operations Command. Mike cut in, his patience wearing thin. Specialized in hostage extraction and high-value target acquisition. 7 years, 38 successful operations until Fallujah. Now I make coffee across the street, and the woman who gave me a chance when no one else would is sitting in there with a gun to her head. So you can either use my help, or you can watch this situation deteriorate while you wait for your tactical team to set up. Silence followed his outburst. Mike watched as Sullivan conferred with Hayes, then spoke into his radio. Moments later, the negotiator's phone call was patched through to the bank. "That's better," Mike said as he observed the leader answering the call. "Keep him talking. His second-in-command is getting twitchy, the one by the teller counter. He's not as disciplined. What else can you tell us about the hostages?" Chief Hayes asked, her tone now respectful. 12 total. The elderly woman needs medical attention. Possible cardiac issue. Carol Matthews is keeping her calm. Mike's voice softened slightly at Carol's name. There's a bank security guard with a shoulder wound. Not serious, but he's losing blood. The others appear unharmed physically, but stress levels are high. As he spoke, Mike continued his careful observation of Diane. While other hostages showed fear, she maintained an unnatural composure, her eyes constantly tracking the robbers' movements and the visible police positions outside. "The woman in the blue suit," Mike continued. "Diane Lambert, bank manager. Something's off about her reactions. She's too calm, too aware of tactical positions. You might want to run a deeper background check." "We're checking everyone in the bank," Sullivan replied. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm not sure yet," Mike admitted. "Just an instinct. An instinct honed by years of identifying threats in chaotic environments, of distinguishing combatants from civilians in split-second decisions. The same instinct that had kept him alive through dozens of operations, and had failed him just once with catastrophic consequences." "Sullivan," Mike said after a moment, "your negotiator needs to offer something concrete. Medical assistance for the elderly woman. These aren't ideological hostage takers. They're after something specific. Offer a goodwill gesture and you might get a hostage release." Through his binoculars, Mike could see Sullivan conferring with the negotiation team. Minutes later, the offer was made through the phone line to the bank. The leader considered it, then gestured to his men. The elderly woman was helped to her feet, Carol supporting her on one side. "It's working," Mike reported, a small measure of relief in his voice. "They're bringing the elderly woman to the door." The front door of the bank opened just enough for the woman to be escorted out. Medical personnel rushed forward to assist her as the door quickly closed again. "One down, 11 to go," Mike said quietly. "Porter," Sullivan's voice had changed, becoming more deferential. "We just got clearance to access your file. I apologize for the confusion earlier. Your expertise is acknowledged." So they knew now. The carefully redacted military record. The classified operations. The incident that had ended his career and sent him seeking anonymity in a small-town coffee shop. "What matters now," Mike replied, "is getting those hostages out safely, and I think I know how we might do that." The coffee shop blueprint lay unfolded beside Mike, its edges curling slightly in the breeze. He'd retrieved it from Carol's office during a brief, calculated movement from his rooftop position. The yellowed paper showed not just the coffee shop's layout but also the shared ventilation system that connected to several buildings on the block, including a partial connection to the bank's outer offices. "Are you certain about this?" Sullivan asked through the burner phone. "The bank's security system is state-of-the-art. The main vault and teller areas." "Yes," Mike replied, tracing a path on the blueprint with his finger. "But the administrative section was added during renovations 5 years ago. The secondary ventilation system was never fully integrated with the primary security grid." "And you know this how?" Chief Hayes interjected. Mike hesitated. Carol had the blueprints from when she was considering expanding the coffee shop. Notice things. What he didn't explain was how automatically he'd assessed and memorized every structural detail of both buildings during his first weeks working at Oak Ridge Coffee. an ingrained habit from years of operational planning where overlooking a single exit route or structural weakness could mean mission failure or worse. Through his binoculars, Mike observed new tension among the robbers. The one guarding the rear exit was checking his watch repeatedly. The leader paced a tight circuit, phone pressed to his ear. Something had changed. They're on a tighter timeline than they expected, Mike noted. The police presence is larger than they planned for. They're improvising now, which makes them dangerous. What are they after? Sullivan asked. The vault contents? Maybe, Mike murmured, focusing on the robbers' movements. But they're showing unusual interest in the bank manager's office. 2 of them have gone back there 3 times now. In the hostage group, Carol had shifted position slightly, placing herself between the most agitated robber and a young female teller who was quietly sobbing. Typical Carol, protecting others even at her own risk. Mike felt a surge of both pride and fear for her. His gaze moved to Diane again. While other hostages huddled together, she maintained a deliberate distance. Her eyes continuously scanned the room, periodically focusing on the bank manager's office with what appeared to be calculation rather than fear. Has your team finished that background check on Diane Lambert? Mike asked. Preliminary results show nothing unusual, Sullivan replied. Bank manager for 3 years, transferred from the Seattle branch. Clean record, solid performance reviews. Dig deeper, Mike insisted. Employment history before Seattle, personal connections, financial records. Something isn't right. As they spoke, one of the robbers suddenly grabbed a young male hostage, dragging him roughly to his feet. Through the bank windows, Mike could see the man's terrified expression as a gun was pressed to his temple. The negotiator's phone rang again. The leader answered, his posture aggressive as he issued new demands, likely using the threatened hostage as leverage. They want the police perimeter pushed back and a vehicle, Sullivan reported moments later. Escalating demands, threatening to kill hostages. Classic diversion tactic, Mike responded, his mind racing through scenarios. They're setting up something else. We need to move soon. Our tactical team is still 20 minutes out, Hayes said, frustration evident in her voice. 20 minutes could be an eternity in a deteriorating hostage situation. Mike had seen similar scenarios play out before. The longer it continued, the higher the risk of violence. I have an alternative approach, Mike said, decision made. The bank's rear office connects to the ventilation system of this building. With minimal breaching equipment, a single operator could access the bank through the administrative section, create a diversion, and provide an opening for your team to enter through the main doors. A single operator, Sullivan repeated. You mean yourself? Yes. Absolutely not, Hayes cut in. You're a civilian now, Porter, regardless of your background. We can't authorize that kind of intervention. With respect, Chief, Mike countered. I'm the only one in position with the training for this. Your tactical team won't arrive in time, and the situation is deteriorating by the minute. Through his binoculars, Mike watched as Carol made a subtle move, drawing the agitated robber's attention away from the threatened hostage. The look in her eyes, determined, unflinching, mirrored what Mike felt inside. She wouldn't give up on those around her. Neither would he. Porter. Frank's voice returned. Mike, are you sure about this? This isn't your fight anymore. Mike's gaze drifted to the coffee shop below, to the blue anniversary mug still sitting on the counter where he'd left it that morning. A lifetime ago, it seemed. It became my fight when they took Carol hostage, he replied quietly. Silence fell on the line. Mike could imagine the debate happening in the command post, law enforcement protocol versus the unorthodox option he presented. What exactly would you need? Sullivan finally asked. Access to the coffee shop's utility room, breaching tools for the ventilation system, and your team ready to move on my signal. More muffled conversation, then Sullivan's decisive voice. We'll have what you need in 5 minutes. But Porter, this is a supporting role only. You create the diversion, our team makes the entry. Clear? Clear, Mike agreed, though his mind was already mapping contingencies beyond what he was sharing. Inside the bank, the robbers were growing increasingly erratic. The leader checked his watch again, then made a slashing gesture toward his companions. Whatever their timeline, it was accelerating. And in the midst of the hostages, Diane Lambert's composed expression had shifted subtly into what Mike recognized all too well. The look of someone watching their own plan unfold. The makeshift whiteboard, Oak Ridge Coffee's daily specials menu wiped clean and repurposed, stood propped against an air conditioning unit on the roof. Mike had sketched the bank's layout from memory, marking entry points, robber positions, and hostage locations with the precision that had once been his stock in trade. A young police officer crouched beside him, eyes wide as Mike detailed the plan. Sullivan had reluctantly sent him up with the requested equipment and to serve as communication liaison. The ventilation access point is here. Mike indicated a spot on his diagram. It connects to the bank's administrative section through this maintenance crawlspace. The security sensors are concentrated on the vault area and main floor, leaving this approach relatively unguarded. And once you're inside? The officer asked. I'll position here. Mike pointed to a storage closet near the rear of the bank. From there, I can create a diversion using these. He held up several small devices fashioned from the coffee shop's equipment, timers from the espresso machines connected to small, makeshift noise generators. Mike had explained only part of his plan to Sullivan and Hayes. The full strategy, including his suspicions about Diane, remained his alone for now. Too many unknown variables, too many potential complications to bring others fully into his confidence. Through his earpiece, now connected to the police command post, Sullivan's voice came through. Porter, our tactical team is 15 minutes out. We need you to hold position until they arrive. Situation's deteriorating too quickly? Mike replied, watching through his binoculars as the agitated robber shoved another hostage roughly to the ground. The unstable one by the teller counter is escalating. We don't have 15 minutes. Carol had shifted again, placing herself between the aggressive robber and the fallen hostage. Her steady gaze, even from this distance, reflected a courage that twisted something in Mike's chest. We've got more on Diane Lambert, Chief Hayes cut in. Something interesting. She only appears in bank records going back 3 years. Before Seattle, we're finding inconsistencies. Mike nodded to himself. His instincts about her had been correct. I'm proceeding with the entry, he said, decision made. Have your people ready to move on my signal. Protests erupted in his earpiece, but Mike was already moving. 3 years of peace dissolved in the fluid movements of his former training. Checking equipment, securing his communication device, mentally preparing for combat conditions. The young officer watched with barely concealed awe. They told me you were just a coffee shop guy. Mike paused, something bittersweet crossing his features. I am, or I was trying to be. The ventilation access point yielded easily to his specialized tools. The narrow passage beyond would be challenging but navigable. Before entering, Mike took one last look at the bank through his binoculars. The robbers had clustered briefly, the leader giving what appeared to be updated instructions. Their body language suggested growing conflict, the aggressive one gesturing sharply, the others more controlled. The leader seemed to be exerting significant effort to maintain discipline. In the hostage group, something unexpected happened. Carol caught sight of Mike's position on the roof. Their eyes met across the distance, and in that moment of recognition, her expression shifted from surprise to understanding. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. She knew. Somehow, she'd always known there was more to him than coffee beans and quiet smiles. Maintain radio contact, Mike instructed the officer. If anything changes, I need to know immediately. The ventilation shaft was tight but manageable. Mike moved with the silent efficiency that had once earned him the nickname Ghost among his former teammates. Each movement calculated, each sound minimized. The skills he'd tried to forget returning with muscle memory that felt both familiar and foreign. Through his earpiece, Sullivan updated him. New intel on Lambert. Her employment history before Seattle has significant gaps. And we found a connection to 3 other bank robberies in the past 5 years. She transferred branches shortly before each incident. She's involved, Mike confirmed. navigating a junction in the ductwork. Possibly the actual orchestrator. The visible leader may be working for her. That changes the dynamic significantly, Sullivan replied. If she's part of the crew, she could alert them to any rescue attempt. Which is why they can't know I'm coming, Mike responded. The shaft narrowed as it approached the connection to the bank building. Dust filled the enclosed space, threatening to trigger a cough that could give away his position. Mike controlled his breathing using techniques long ingrained. 4 counts in, hold for 7, 8 counts out. His heart rate slowed, his focus sharpened. A memory surfaced, his training instructor's voice. Your greatest weapon isn't your rifle. It's the ability to become invisible even in plain sight. To move through chaos undetected. To strike with precision when no one expects it. Mike reached a grate overlooking the bank's rear office. Through the slats, he could see filing cabinets, a desk with a computer, and importantly, no robbers. Just beyond the office door would be the main floor where the hostages were held. He removed the grate with practiced care, ensuring it made no sound as he set it aside. Then he lowered himself into the office, landing in a crouch that distributed his weight silently across the carpeted floor. For the first time in 3 years, Michael Porter was operational again. Not a barista making lattes, but a ghost moving through enemy territory with lethal purpose. Only this time, his mission wasn't to take lives. It was to save them. The silver medal caught a sliver of light as Mike removed it from his pocket. Not large or ostentatious, a simple commendation for valor under fire, but it had been the only piece of his military life he couldn't bring himself to lock away completely. Before every critical mission, he'd touched it briefly, a talisman connecting him to the ideal of service that had first led him to enlist. Now, crouched in the bank manager's office, he allowed himself that one moment of ritual before returning the medal to his pocket. The distant person he'd been and the barista he'd become converging into something new, something necessary for the task at hand. Through his earpiece, Sullivan provided updates. Tactical team 10 minutes out. Negotiator keeping the leader engaged on the phone. We've identified the bank manager as Diana Reeves, not Diane Lambert. She's suspected in connection with heists in Seattle, Portland, and Boise. Always as an inside person, never directly implicated. Mike processed this confirmation of his suspicions while setting up his first diversion device. A timer connected to the office phone that would trigger it to ring in precisely 3 minutes. Simple but effective for drawing attention. The robber's behavior suggests they're after something specific, Mike whispered. Not just cash. The two who checked the manager's office were looking for something particular. Bank records show a large deposit scheduled for transfer today, Sullivan replied. High-value bearer bonds from a client closing their account. Could be the target. Mike moved silently to the office door, positioning himself to see through the narrow gap into the main bank floor. The hostages remained clustered in the center, Carol still among them. The aggressive robber paced nearby, weapon held with the casual disregard of someone unfamiliar with proper firearms discipline. The leader stood by the front windows, phone to his ear, engaged with the negotiator. From this angle, Mike could see his face partially beneath the mask, hard eyes constantly scanning, mouth set in a grim line. Professional, dangerous, but increasingly concerned as their timeline stretched beyond the original plan. Most revealing was Diane or Diana, her composed demeanor a stark contrast to the genuine fear displayed by the other hostages. She sat slightly apart, eyes tracking the robber's movements with the calculated assessment of someone monitoring employees rather than captors. I can see all 4 robbers from my position, Mike reported quietly. Leader by the front windows, twitchy one guarding hostages, one by the vault, one at the rear exit. Diana is sitting with the hostages but maintaining separation. She's watching the clock. What's your assessment of the situation? Sullivan asked, his earlier skepticism now replaced with professional respect. They're waiting for something, Mike replied. The leader keeps checking his watch. Diana's focus suggests a timetable. I suspect a scheduled event, possibly the transfer of those bearer bonds. As he spoke, Mike observed Carol carefully. She remained calm, offering reassurance to those around her. But there was something else. a subtle alertness to her posture that hadn't been there before. When her gaze swept the room, it paused fractionally on the office door behind which Mike was concealed. She knew he was there. Somehow, she'd sensed his presence. Their eyes met briefly through the crack in the door, and Carol gave an almost imperceptible nod. Then, with deliberate casualness, she shifted position, drawing the nervous robber's attention away from Mike's hiding spot. In that moment, Mike realized Carol had been running interference for him all along, subtly redirecting attention, creating small distractions. The maternal figure who'd given him a chance at a new life was now his unwitting but essential ally in this operation. "First diversion device activating in 30 seconds, Mike whispered. "When it draws their attention, I'll place the second device near the vault area. Remember, this is reconnaissance and diversion only," Sullivan emphasized. "Our tactical team will handle the actual breach." Mike didn't respond to that. Some plans were better kept to himself. The office phone rang suddenly, startling in the tense silence. As predicted, the robber near the vault turned sharply, gesturing for the leader's attention. After a brief exchange, the leader nodded, and the vault robber moved cautiously toward the office. Mike was already gone from his position, sliding silently along the wall to a new hiding spot behind a decorative column. As the robber entered the office to check the phone, Mike placed his second device, a small timer attached to the fire alarm panel that would trigger in precisely 2 minutes. "One device planted, second in position," Mike reported. The vault robber took the bait, checking the office now. Through the main windows, Mike could see the police perimeter, the command post where Sullivan and Hayes monitored the situation. Beyond them, curious onlookers and news vans gathered, the inevitable spectacle of crisis. The robber emerged from the office, shaking his head at the leader. The tension in the room ratcheted higher. The nervous one grabbed a female hostage roughly, shouting something Mike couldn't quite hear. "Situation deteriorating," Mike whispered urgently. "The unstable one is escalating." Carol moved again, drawing the agitated robber's attention with a calm statement. Whatever she said caused him to release the hostage and turn toward her instead, weapon raised threateningly. Mike's body tensed, every instinct screaming to intervene immediately, but operational discipline held him in place. Rushing would only endanger everyone further. "If your team isn't here in 5 minutes," Mike said quietly, "I'm proceeding regardless." Carol's directly at risk now. As he spoke, his gaze found Diana again. She was watching the confrontation between Carol and the robber with what appeared to be irritation rather than fear, the expression of someone whose carefully orchestrated plan was being derailed by an underling's poor impulse control. The second device would trigger soon, creating another diversion. Mike readied himself, mentally mapping his approach to the nervous robber who now threatened Carol directly. In his pocket, his fingers brushed against the silver metal once more. Not for luck, for purpose. Between Mike's fingers, the small paper crane took shape with surprising delicacy. Sam had taught him the origami fold during a slow afternoon at the coffee shop, insisting it would help with stress. "My grandmother says folding cranes brings peace," Sam had explained, guiding Mike's initially clumsy attempts. Now, in the tense stillness before action, Mike's hands remembered the pattern. Fold, crease, fold again. The small ritual centered him, slowing his breathing, focusing his mind. The completed crane sat in his palm for just a moment before he tucked it into his pocket beside the metal. Peace and purpose. The barista and the operative. Both parts of him would be necessary in the next few minutes. Through his earpiece, the situation outside was deteriorating in parallel with the tensions inside. "FBI Director Coleman just arrived on scene," Sullivan reported, voice tight with frustration. "He's questioning our approach, wanting to take direct control of the operation." "Your tactical team?" Mike asked quietly. "Still 7 minutes out. Coleman's talking about waiting for them, going by the book." Mike watched as the agitated robber continued to focus on Carol, weapon gesturing erratically as he spoke. The leader was attempting to regain control of the situation, his body language betraying growing concern. "We don't have 7 minutes," Mike stated flatly. The nervous one is close to breaking, and I think the leader knows it. As if confirming his assessment, the leader moved toward his unstable colleague, speaking in low, urgent tones. The nervous robber responded with agitated gestures, clearly resisting attempts to be calmed. Most telling was Diana's reaction. Her composed facade had cracked slightly, a flash of genuine concern crossing her features as she observed the deteriorating discipline among her team. "I have confirmation on Diana Reeves," Chief Hayes cut in. "Former military intelligence, dishonorably discharged 8 years ago. Suspected of using her training to plan at least 5 bank robberies, but never enough evidence to prosecute." "Military intelligence explains her operational planning," Mike observed, "and why these robberies have been so successful." His second diversion device triggered suddenly, the fire alarm panel emitting a sharp, electronic tone before falling silent again. Not a full alarm, but enough to draw attention. As predicted, the robbers reacted instantly, the leader barking orders as 2 of them moved to investigate the source of the sound. "Now, Sullivan," Mike whispered urgently, "have your negotiator call. Keep the leader occupied." Within seconds, the leader's phone rang. He answered it immediately, attention divided between the call and his men searching for the source of the alarm. The moment had arrived. Mike moved from his hiding place, sliding silently along the wall toward the nervous robber who still stood near Carol, momentarily distracted by the commotion. "I'm moving," Mike informed Sullivan, "targeting the unstable one first." "Porter, wait for tactical," Sullivan began. Mike removed his earpiece. Some operations required complete focus, without external voices, however well-intentioned. Years of training condensed into fluid motion as he closed the distance. The nervous robber never sensed his approach. One precise strike to the nerve cluster at the base of the neck, and the man crumpled silently. Mike caught him before he hit the floor, easing the unconscious form down while simultaneously relieving him of his weapon. Carol's eyes widened, but to her credit, she made no sound of surprise. Instead, she subtly shifted position to block the view from the other robbers, buying Mike precious seconds. A hostage gasped, drawing Diana's attention. Her eyes locked with Mike's, recognition and calculation flashing across her face. Not fear, assessment. She'd identified him as the variable her plan hadn't accounted for. Mike pressed a finger to his lips, signaling the hostages to remain quiet. Most were too shocked to do anything but comply. He positioned himself behind a counter, calculating his next move as the leader continued his phone conversation, unaware of the change in dynamics. The 2 robbers investigating the alarm were returning, having found nothing. Mike had perhaps 30 seconds before they discovered their missing colleague. He caught Carol's eye and gestured subtly toward the bank's side exit. She understood immediately, beginning to quietly organize the hostages nearest her. Diana observed this exchange, her expression hardening. She began to rise, clearly intending to alert the remaining robbers. Mike had anticipated this. His third diversion device, placed during his initial movement through the bank, activated precisely on schedule. The coffee maker in the employee break room began an ear-splitting grinding noise, drawing the attention of everyone in the main room. In that moment of distraction, Mike moved again, reaching Diana before she could call out. "Don't," he whispered, the confiscated weapon pressed discreetly against her side. "Military intelligence should know when an operation is compromised." Her eyes narrowed. "You're not police." "No," Mike agreed. "I'm the barista from across the street. The one who's been making your Ethiopian pour-overs for the past 3 months. Recognition dawned in her eyes, followed by something like grudging respect. "Clever cover." "It wasn't a cover," Mike replied, the truth of this statement resonating within him. "Now stay quiet and still." The leader, finishing his call with the negotiator, turned back to the main floor. His sharp eyes immediately registered the missing robber, his posture shifting instantly to high alert. Outside, police radios crackled with increased activity. The tactical team had arrived, taking position around the building's perimeter. Mike assessed his position, the hostages, the remaining robbers. The situation had evolved beyond his original plan, requiring adaptation. Carol had managed to move several hostages closer to the side exit, positioning herself to lead their escape when the opportunity came. The moment balanced on a knife's edge, part resolved, part escalated. Mike had neutralized one threat but revealed his presence in the process. The tactical team was in position but unaware of the changed dynamics inside. And Diana, the mastermind, was contained but still dangerous. A professional operator who wouldn't surrender easily. In his earpiece, discarded on the floor but still transmitting, Sullivan's voice came through. "Porter, tactical team in position. What's your status?" The leader heard it too, his head snapping toward the sound. His eyes scanned the room, weapon raised, as the full realization of the infiltration hit him. "Everyone down," he shouted to his remaining men. "We've been compromised." The carefully orchestrated bank robbery had just transformed into something far more volatile. A desperate last stand by cornered professionals. And Mike Porter, caught between his past and present selves, prepared for the moment that would determine whether his return to his former skills would save lives or cost them. Diana's employee badge gleamed under the bank's fluorescent lights, the plastic surface reflecting like a mirror as Mike palmed it from her pocket. The photo showed her professional smile, the name Diane Lambert printed below it with the bank's logo. A perfect forgery right down to the security hologram, the kind of detail that spoke to extensive planning and resources. 3 years, Mike said quietly, keeping the weapon trained on her while scanning for the remaining robbers' positions. "You've been building this cover for 3 years. Longer," Diana replied, her composure returning despite the circumstances. "The real Diane Lambert hasn't existed for 5 years. Amazing what you can do with the right documentation." The leader had taken position behind a marble column, his weapon trained on the general area where he'd heard Sullivan's voice through the earpiece. His remaining team member covered the hostages from behind the teller counter. This isn't just about the bearer bonds, Mike realized, observing Diana's calculated expression. Those are just the visible target. A thin smile crossed her face. "Very good, Barista. Not as simple as you thought, is it?" Mike's tactical training kicked in, mind assembling the puzzle pieces. The bank's been a front for something else. Money laundering. The bonds are a cover for the real operation. Partially correct, Diana conceded. But that's the least of what's stored in the secure vault downstairs, the one that doesn't appear on any official blueprints. Outside, police lights reflected against the windows as the tactical team moved into final position. The leader recognized the signs, his body language becoming more agitated as he barked orders to his remaining man. Carol had managed to gather most of the hostages into a tight group near the side exit, using the confusion to their advantage. Her eyes met Mike's briefly, seeking guidance. Mike gave a subtle shake of his head. "Not yet. Your team is going to be caught," he told Diana. "Whatever your plan was, it's over." "Is it?" Diana's confidence was unsettling. "You've been watching me for months, just as I've been watching you." The quiet barista with military precision in his movements. "We're not so different, you and I." "I don't take hostages," Mike countered. "No, you just pull triggers from rooftops," she replied. "At least according to your file." The comment hit its mark. Mike's expression remained neutral, but something cold settled in his chest. She knew who he was, had known perhaps all along. A memory flashed, Diana asking specific questions about his past during their casual conversations. Her interest in his opinions on security measures. The way she'd watched him when she thought he wasn't looking. "You've been vetting me," he realized. "Planning to recruit me." Her smile widened fractionally. "A man with your skills making coffee? Such a waste. I could offer you something more aligned with your capabilities." "Those capabilities nearly destroyed me," Mike replied, the admission surprising him with its honesty. The leader's voice cut through their exchange. "Diana, we need to move to contingency plan Delta." Her expression shifted subtly, a flash of annoyance at being addressed by name in front of witnesses. "Whatever you're planning won't work," Mike said. "The FBI has identified you. Your cover's blown." "Then I have nothing to lose," Diana replied, her voice hardening. And you should know how dangerous that makes someone. Through his peripheral vision, Mike noted the tactical team taking final positions outside the building. Sullivan would be coordinating their breach, unaware of the changed dynamics inside. Diana's true role, the unconscious robber, Mike's position. The leader made a decision, moving suddenly toward the hostages. Everyone up. We're moving to the vault. Carol stood protectively in front of her group. These people need to be released. You've already lost control of the situation. The leader raised his weapon toward her. Move. Now. Mike's grip tightened on his confiscated weapon, calculating angles, risks, the likelihood of hitting the leader without endangering Carol or the hostages. Diana sensed his tension. Don't, she murmured. He's wearing body armor. You'd just provoke him to shoot. Mike knew she was manipulating him, but the risk assessment was accurate. A direct confrontation would endanger the hostages further. Let them go, Mike called to the leader. The police know who you are, who Diana is. Your only leverage now is cooperation. The leader hesitated, clearly weighing options. His eyes darted to Diana, seeking direction despite his apparent authority. And in that moment, the truth crystallized for Mike. The leader wasn't giving orders to Diana. He was receiving them. He's not in charge, Mike said quietly. You are. You've been directing this from inside all along. Diana's expression remained neutral, but her eyes held a gleam of acknowledgement. The visible leader, the apparent robbers, they're all part of your staging. Mike continued, the operational pattern becoming clear. A theatrical production to hide the real objective. Not bad for a barista, Diana replied, her tone almost appreciative. The leader's radio crackled. We have a situation at the secondary location. Came a voice Mike hadn't heard before. Police presence increasing. Window closing fast. Diana's composure slipped momentarily, a flicker of genuine concern crossing her features. Secondary location, Mike repeated. This isn't the only target today. The leader looked to Diana again, awaiting instruction. She gave a barely perceptible nod, and he immediately redirected his attention to the hostages. Change of plans, he announced. Everyone into the vault area now. As the remaining robber began herding the frightened hostages, Diana leaned closer to Mike. You have a choice to make, she said softly. The tactical team will breach in approximately 45 seconds. When they do, this becomes chaotic very quickly. People get hurt in chaos. What's your point? Mike asked, though he already sensed where she was heading. Help me complete my objective, and I guarantee everyone walks out alive, Diana offered. Fight me, and I can't make that promise. Outside, the tactical team had reached final position. Through the windows, Mike could see them preparing for breach, unaware of the true nature of the situation inside. In his years of operational experience, Mike had learned to recognize when someone was telling the truth despite their broader deceptions. Diana's guarantee had the ring of authenticity, a professional keeping collateral damage to a minimum. But her objective remained unknown, potentially dangerous beyond the confines of this bank and these hostages. The choice before him wasn't just between past and present, between the barista and the operative. It was between the immediate safety of those he cared about and the wider implications of whatever Diana had set in motion. The yellowed newspaper clipping had fallen from Diana's pocket during their confrontation, a folded square of newsprint that might have gone unnoticed if Mike's training hadn't conditioned him to register every detail. He palmed it while maintaining his focus on Diana and the escalating situation. A glance revealed its contents. A 3-year-old story about a bank robbery in Portland. In the background of the main photograph, barely visible among onlookers behind police tape, stood a woman whose face matched Diana's, though with different hair, different name badge visible on her jacket. This isn't your first performance, Mike noted, tucking the clipping away. You were in Portland before Seattle. Diana's eyes narrowed slightly, the first genuine flash of concern he'd seen from her. You're more observant than most. Part of the training, Mike replied. The tactical team outside was seconds from breach. Decision time. What's in the hidden vault? Evidence, Diana answered. surprising him with apparent honesty. Financial records documenting decades of money laundering for some very powerful people. Politicians, judges, corporate executives, all using this unassuming branch as their private washing machine. Mike processed this claim, weighing its plausibility. And you're what? A vigilante exposing corruption? A thin smile curved Diana's lips. I'm a businesswoman. Those records are worth millions to the right buyers, whether for exposure or suppression. The leader approached, tension evident in his posture. Diana, we need to move. Now. Give me a minute, she replied, not bothering to maintain the hostage pretense. The leader glanced nervously toward the windows where tactical team shadows were visible. We don't have a minute. Carol had positioned herself between the remaining robber and the most vulnerable hostages. Her eyes met Mike's across the room. Questioning, concerned, but remarkably steady. Your friend is brave, Diana observed. Foolish but brave. She believes in protecting people, Mike said. Something I used to understand clearly. Diana studied him, calculation visible behind her composed expression. The tactical team will breach in approximately 30 seconds. When they do, my associate will be forced to defend himself. In the confusion, people will be caught in crossfire. Unless, Mike prompted, already sensing the leverage play. Unless you help me access the hidden vault and retrieve the records, Diana finished. Do that, and I give you my word everyone walks out alive. The word of a professional liar. The word of a professional operator, Diana corrected. Unnecessary casualties are bad for business and attract unwanted attention. I have no interest in harming civilians, including your manager. Mike's mind raced through scenarios, calculating risks and outcomes with the precision that had once made him exceptional at his former profession. The tactical team would follow standard breach protocols. Flashbangs, immediate entry, shouted commands. In the chaos, with desperate, armed men and frightened hostages, casualties were almost inevitable. How do I know you'll keep your word? Mike asked, stalling while formulating his own counter-strategy. Because I could have identified you to my team months ago, Diana replied. I've known who you were since your second week making my coffee. Former JSOC operator with a specialty in precision. Elimination. A ghost who vanished after a mission went bad. Her voice lowered. Fallujah. The hospital. 3 civilian casualties that weren't supposed to be there. The words hit like physical blows. The mission that had ended his career, the one that still haunted his dreams. The intel had been wrong. The target had moved to a different building. His shot had triggered a secondary explosion that killed 3 medical personnel. Diana saw the impact of her words. I know what it's like to carry that weight, to try to disappear, to become someone else. The difference is, I embraced who I really am. Outside, the tactical team leader was giving final instructions through hand signals. Seconds remained before breach. Last chance, Diana said. Help me and everyone lives. Fight me and it's chaos with all the risk that entails. Mike made his decision. Tell your men to stand down, he instructed. I'll help you access the vault on one condition. The hostages are released immediately. Carol leads them out. Diana considered this briefly, then nodded to the leader. Release the hostages except for the bank staff. We need their access codes. The leader hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with changing plans so drastically. The secondary team will adapt. Diana cut him off. Do it. As the leader reluctantly began instructing the remaining robber to prepare the hostages for release, Mike caught Carol's eye and gave a subtle nod. Her expression showed concern but also trust, faith in whatever plan he was executing. I need to retrieve my earpiece, Mike told Diana. Let the tactical team know what's happening. Prevent them from breaching during the hostage release. Diana nodded cautiously. Slowly, Mike moved carefully to where his discarded earpiece lay, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. He picked it up and spoke. Sullivan, this is Porter. Hostages are being released through the front entrance. Hold your breach. Repeat, hold your breach. After a moment, Sullivan's voice came through, tense but controlled. Porter, What's happening in there? Negotiated partial hostage release, Mike replied, choosing his words carefully with Diana watching. Situation evolving. Trust me on this. Pause, then copy that. Holding position. Outside, the tactical team adjusted, moving to secure the front entrance for hostage extraction rather than breach. Diana watched this development with something like reluctant respect. Smart, she acknowledged. Leveraging their trust in you. Not leverage, Mike corrected. Responsibility. As the hostages began moving toward the front entrance, Carol organizing them into a calm line despite their fear, Mike noticed Frank Mercer standing with Chief Hayes near the command post. The retired detective's eyes fixed on Mike through the bank windows, a knowing look passing between them. Frank had seen enough operations in his long career to recognize one unfolding now. One that might not be precisely what it appeared on the surface. The first hostages stepped out into the sunlight, hands raised as instructed, met by tactical officers who quickly guided them to safety. Carol remained inside, ushering others ahead of her, refusing to leave while people still needed her help, just like Mike was doing in his own way with much higher stakes. The vault, Diana prompted as the last civilian hostages exited. Now, the small wind flag, a strip of red fabric barely 3 inches long, fluttered almost imperceptibly in the air conditioning current. Mike had placed it discreetly on a nearby filing cabinet, an old sniper's habit for monitoring air movement that might affect precision operations. In enclosed spaces, even the subtle flow from ventilation systems could impact timing and execution. Diana watched with professional curiosity as Mike assessed the bank manager's office where they now stood. Old habits, she noted. I have my own. The remaining bank staff, 3 tellers and an assistant manager, huddled in the main area under the leader's watchful eye. Carol remained with them, her calm presence visibly steadying the others despite the tension. The vault access isn't in the main security panel, Diana explained, gesturing to the office's back wall. It's hidden behind that painting, a biometric lock disguised as a thermostat control. Mike studied the indicated wall. Whose biometrics? The actual regional director's, who visits quarterly for routine inspections of the special accounts. Diana produced a small device from her pocket. Fortunately, we've collected what we need. Through his earpiece, Sullivan's voice came through. Porter, we need status. What's happening in there? Mike responded carefully, aware of Diana monitoring every word. Situation contained. Working on resolution pathway. We've got movement at a second location, Sullivan replied. A branch office of Coastal Investment Group 3 blocks away. Possible related incident. Diana's expression remained neutral, but a flash of calculation crossed her eyes. The secondary team, Mike deduced. Working simultaneously. Compartmentalized operations, Diana confirmed. Safer that way. As Diana approached the hidden panel, Mike maintained his position near the door, assessing sightlines and distances. Through the office's interior window, he could see Carol speaking quietly to the frightened bank staff, her demeanor reassuring despite her own precarious situation. Your manager, Diana observed, following his gaze. She means something to you. She gave me a chance when no one else would, Mike replied simply. Diana nodded as she worked the hidden panel. We all need someone like that. Someone who sees beyond the surface. The panel slid open, revealing an advanced biometric scanner. Diana applied her device to its surface, and after several tense seconds, a green light flashed. A soft mechanical click followed, and a section of the wall retracted, revealing a narrow staircase leading downward. The real vault, Diana announced, where the actual business of this bank happens. Mike maintained his position. Ladies first. Diana smiled thinly. Professional caution. I respect that. She gestured to the leader, who had appeared at the office doorway. Marcus will accompany us. As they descended the stairs, Mike cataloged every detail. The reinforced walls, the multiple security cameras, the subtle signs of frequent use despite the vault's supposed secrecy. This was no ordinary bank branch. The infrastructure alone suggested significant investment and security considerations. The staircase opened into a small, climate-controlled room dominated by a modern vault door. Unlike the bank's public vault upstairs, this one featured no bank branding, only a sophisticated electronic lock and reinforced steel construction. The inner sanctum, Diana murmured, approaching the lock, where the powerful hide their secrets. Marcus positioned himself near the stairs, weapon ready but not directly aimed at Mike. A professional courtesy between operators that Diana had likely instructed. "Porter, we need confirmation of your status." Sullivan's voice came through the earpiece again, tension evident. "Tactical is standing by. Maintaining control of the situation," Mike responded carefully. "No threat to remaining hostages at present." Diana worked the vault lock with practiced efficiency, applying another electronic device to its surface. "For minutes," she announced. "Then we're in." Mike used those minutes to complete his assessment. The vault room had no other exits. The stairs were the only way in or out. The ventilation system was minimal, likely on a separate circuit from the main building. The entire setup was designed for secrecy and security, with multiple redundant systems. "Your plan after this?" Mike asked, keeping his tone conversational. "The tactical team has the building surrounded. Your secondary team has been compromised." "Contingencies exist," Diana replied without looking up from her work. "They always do in operations like this." The vault lock emitted a series of soft beeps, then a louder tone of confirmation. The heavy door began to swing open automatically. Inside, rather than cash or valuables, the vault contained rows of filing cabinets and a sophisticated computer server setup. Climate control kept the temperature precisely regulated, with humidity monitors visible on the walls. "Digital and physical records," Diana explained, moving immediately to a specific cabinet. "Backups of backups. The paranoid are often right to be cautious." She removed a portable hard drive from her pocket and connected it to the server. 2 minutes to copy the core files. Mike maintained his position by the entrance, calculating options and timelines. Above them, the remaining hostages were still at risk. The tactical team was holding position based solely on his word. Diana's secondary team had been compromised but might still be operational. Too many variables, too many potential complications. Through his earpiece, a new development. "Porter, we've got Frank Mercer here insisting on speaking with you. Says he has critical information." Mike's attention sharpened. Frank wouldn't interject without good reason. "Put him through," Mike replied. Moments later, Frank's gravelly voice came on the line. "Mike, I've been reviewing Diana Reeves' file. There's something you need to know." Diana glanced up sharply at the mention of her name. "She's not after evidence to expose," Frank continued urgently. "Those records contain informant identities and undercover operations details. She's a broker for organized crime. They want to know who's been informing against them." The implications hit Mike instantly. This wasn't about money laundering evidence. It was about compromising confidential informants. People who would be killed if their identities were revealed. Diana read his expression, her own hardening. "Complications?" she asked, voice cool as she continued downloading files. "You might say that," Mike replied, his decision crystallizing with cold clarity. Whatever happened next, he couldn't allow those files to leave the vault. The lives of too many people, people who had taken enormous risks to bring down criminal organizations, hung in the balance. The wind flag on his collar fluttered slightly as the vault's air circulation system cycled. A subtle reminder of changing conditions, of the need to adjust for new variables. Just as he'd done countless times before, when lives depended on his judgment and precision. The breathing counter, a small device no larger than a poker chip, rested in Mike's palm, its display showing a rhythmic pattern of light. A specialized tool from his former life, designed to regulate a sniper's breathing before a difficult shot. For counts in, hold for 7, 8 counts out. The device had been among the items in his duffel bag, a reminder of the precision that had once defined his existence. As Diana continued downloading files, Mike activated the counter discreetly, syncing his breathing to its pattern. Calm settling over him like a familiar cloak. 90 seconds remaining, Diana announced, watching the progress bar on her device. Marcus shifted position near the stairs, professional but growing tense as the operation extended beyond its planned timeline. The secondary team has gone silent, he reported quietly to Diana. Her expression remained composed, but Mike noted the subtle tightening of her jaw. Proceed as planned. Through his earpiece, Sullivan updated him on the external situation. Porter, Tactical has contained the secondary location. 2 suspects in custody. We need resolution at your position soon. Mike acknowledged with a brief copy that, maintaining his careful observation of Diana and Marcus, the variables had shifted significantly. Diana's contingency plans were unraveling. Her secondary team compromised. Her carefully orchestrated operation falling apart at the seams, which made her more dangerous, not less. Your exit strategy is collapsing, Mike noted calmly, his breathing steady with the counter's rhythm. The tactical team has your secondary group. Your timeline is compromised. Diana glanced up from the download. There are always more contingencies than appear on the surface. Like the helicopter scheduled for extraction from the roof of the coastal investment building, Mike suggested, watching her reaction closely. The one that's now surrounded by police. A flicker of genuine surprise crossed her features before she masked it. You're more informed than you should be. I've been doing my own contingency planning, Mike replied. Upstairs, through the office window visible from their position, Mike could see Carol methodically separating the remaining hostages into smaller groups. On the surface, it appeared she was simply comforting them in clusters. But Mike recognized the tactical advantage she was creating, dispersing potential targets, making them harder to control. Carol caught his eye briefly through the multiple layers of glass. Something passed between them, unspoken understanding, trust built over 3 years of small moments and quiet conversations. Your manager is being rather active with the hostages, Diana observed, following his gaze. She organizes people when she's nervous, Mike replied. A habit. Diana didn't appear entirely convinced but returned her attention to the download. 60 seconds. Mike knew what those 60 seconds meant. Not just for the immediate situation, but for the lives of countless confidential informants whose identities were in those files. People who had risked everything to bring down criminal organizations. People who would be systematically eliminated if their covers were blown. Sullivan. Mike spoke quietly into his earpiece. I'm going to create an opportunity. When I do, have Tactical ready to move immediately. Priority is securing the remaining hostages on the main floor. Copy that, Sullivan replied. Standing by for your signal. Diana's attention sharpened. Planning something heroic, Barista? Just assessing options, Mike answered. Professional habit. His mind had already formulated multiple scenarios, calculating risks and outcomes with the precision that had once made him exceptional. The breathing counter continued its steady rhythm in his palm, grounding him in the present moment while his training projected possible futures. Marcus shifted again, checking his watch. 5 minutes until radio check with the extraction team. They won't answer, Mike said with quiet certainty. Your extraction has been compromised. Diana's eyes narrowed. You seem very confident about that. Because I would have made sure of it, Mike replied simply. It's what I would have done in my former life. Something like professional respect flickered across Diana's expression. Then we understand each other. I understand that you're willing to sacrifice innocent lives for profit, Mike countered. Informants who risked everything to do the right thing. They made their choices, Diana replied coldly. As we all do. The download progress reached 90%. Soon, Diana would have what she came for, and dozens of lives would be forfeit. Mike made his decision. Sullivan, he said clearly into his earpiece. On my signal, breach all entrances simultaneously. Be advised I am initiating countdown. 10 seconds. Diana reacted instantly, drawing a concealed weapon from beneath her jacket. That would be extremely unwise. Marcus raised his weapon as well, training it directly on Mike. 9. Mike continued calmly, the breathing counter steady in his palm. Stop the countdown or I'll have Marcus eliminate the hostages upstairs, Diana threatened, her composed facade cracking slightly. 8. Through the office window, Mike could see Carol had positioned herself near the emergency exit. The other hostages clustered strategically around support columns that would provide cover during a breach. 7. Diana's expression hardened. You're risking everything. Your life, your manager's life, all of them. For what? People you don't even know. 6. Last chance, Porter. Diana warned, her weapon unwavering. I respected your skills enough to offer you a choice. Don't make me regret that professional courtesy. 5. Marcus spoke urgently into his radio, attempting to contact their extraction team. No response came. 4. Diana made a decision of her own, nodding sharply to Marcus. Go upstairs. Secure the manager. She's clearly important to him. As Marcus turned toward the stairs, Mike continued his countdown. 3. Diana's download reached 98%. Almost complete. 2. Marcus had reached the top of the stairs, door opening to the office above. 1. Mike moved. The modified rifle had remained hidden in Mike's duffel, a last resort he'd hoped not to use. But when he'd positioned his equipment on the coffee shop roof hours earlier, he'd made certain adaptations, replacing standard ammunition with specialized non-lethal rounds designed to incapacitate rather than kill. The distinction mattered to the man he'd become, even as he returned to the skills of the man he'd been. Now, as Mike moved with fluid precision honed through years of high-stakes operations, time seemed to slow. His first action wasn't toward Diana but to the server bank. A sharp, precise strike to the power connection that plunged the system into darkness, interrupting the download at 99%. Diana fired immediately, her shot grazing Mike's shoulder as he twisted away. Professional, accurate, but hampered by the sudden darkness and his unexpected movement pattern. Breach now, Mike shouted into his earpiece, knowing Sullivan would already have tactical teams in motion based on his countdown. Above them, multiple explosions echoed through the building as flashbangs detonated at entry points. The carefully synchronized breach had begun. Diana lunged for her device, still connected to the now-dark server. Mike intercepted her with a controlled tackle that sent them both crashing into a filing cabinet. The device clattered across the floor, its screen cracked but still functioning. You've made a serious mistake, Diana hissed, driving a precise strike toward Mike's throat that he barely deflected. Her combat training was evident, methodical, efficient movements that spoke of professional instruction similar to his own. This wasn't a desperate criminal fighting for escape. This was an operator executing contingency protocols. Marcus had disappeared up the stairs at the first sound of the breach, presumably to secure what leverage remained with the hostages. Through his earpiece, Mike could hear the controlled chaos of the tactical operation. Commands, confirmations, the systematic clearing of rooms. Main floor secure, came Sullivan's voice. 3 hostages safe, including the manager. 1 suspect in custody. 1 engaging our team near the vault entrance. Relief surged through Mike at the confirmation of Carol's safety, momentarily distracting him. Diana exploited the opening, landing a solid blow to his injured shoulder that sent a jolt of pain through his body. Those files represent 3 years of planning, Diana said, her voice cold with fury. Do you have any idea what you've cost me? I know exactly what I've saved, Mike countered, regaining his balance and positioning himself between Diana and her device. The lives of people who were brave enough to stand against organizations that would kill them without hesitation. Diana's expression hardened. Sentimentality. I expected better from someone with your background. She lunged again, this time with a concealed blade that caught the dim emergency lighting. Mike deflected the strike but felt the sharp edge slice along his forearm, a calculated wound, designed to weaken but not incapacitate. Professional courtesy even in combat. The tactical team was moving down the stairs now, their methodical approach audible through the open door. Diana assessed the situation with cold calculation, eyes darting between Mike, her device, and the approaching officers. "This isn't over," she stated, more fact than threat. Mike recognized the shift in her posture, the subtle preparation for a final, desperate move. "There's no way out, Diana. The building is surrounded. Your secondary team is in custody. It's finished." A thin smile crossed her face. "There's always another way. You should know that better than most." She moved suddenly, not toward Mike or the device, but toward a ventilation grate in the corner of the room, one not marked on any blueprint, likely connected to the building's original infrastructure before renovations. Mike lunged to intercept her, but her earlier strike had done its work. His injured arm responded a fraction too slowly. Diana reached the grate, fingers finding hidden release mechanisms that suggested extensive advance planning. The grate swung open, revealing a narrow passage beyond. Diana slipped inside with practiced efficiency, pausing only to look back at Mike. "We could have been exceptional together," she said, genuine regret coloring her tone. "Perhaps in another life." Then she was gone, the grate slamming shut behind her. The tactical team burst into the vault room seconds later, weapons trained, commands shouted. Mike identified himself immediately, hands raised to avoid any confusion in the high-tension moment. "Sullivan, this is Porter." He spoke into his earpiece. "I'm in the vault room with your tactical team. Diana Reeves has escaped through a hidden passage in the ventilation system. Secure her device. It contains partial downloaded files that must be contained." "Copy that," Sullivan replied. "Are you injured?" "Nothing serious," Mike answered, though blood soaked his sleeve from Diana's calculated strike. "What's the status upstairs?" "All hostages secure. 2 suspects in custody, including the leader. 1 down with non-lethal injuries." Sullivan's voice softened slightly. "Your manager is safe. She's asking about you." Relief washed through Mike, more powerful than the adrenaline of combat. "Tell her I'm fine. I'll be up shortly." As the tactical team secured the vault and the damaged server, Mike retrieved Diana's device, ensuring the downloaded files couldn't be accessed remotely. The partial download meant some informant identities might have been compromised, but not all lives saved through seconds of interrupted power. One of the tactical officers approached, offering a field dressing for Mike's arm. "You need medical attention, sir." "Later," Mike replied, his focus already shifting to the next priority. "We need to secure these files and understand exactly what was compromised." The officer gave him a curious look. "Sullivan said you were a barista." Mike applied the dressing to his arm, the practiced movement at odds with the civilian occupation. "I am," he replied simply, and it was true in its way. The skills that had once made him exceptional in combat had been redirected. Precision, focus, attention to detail, all applied to creating perfect espresso shots and intricate latte art. But today, those same skills had served their original purpose once more. As he climbed the stairs back to the main floor, Mike knew his carefully constructed anonymity was gone. The quiet life he'd built at Oak Ridge Coffee would never be quite the same. The question was whether that represented loss or liberation. A single coffee bean rested in Carol's palm, rescued from her pocket where she'd absently placed it that morning before leaving for the bank delivery. Somehow, it had remained with her throughout the ordeal, a small talisman of the normal life that had been so violently interrupted. "You know," she said, studying the bean as they sat in the makeshift command post that had been established in a building adjacent to the bank, "I always suspected there was more to you than espresso skills." Mike looked up from where a paramedic was finishing the proper dressing of his arm wound. "What gave me away?" "Little things," Carol replied. "The way you always positioned yourself facing the door. How you noticed everything, remembered every customer's preference after hearing it once. The precision in everything you did." She smiled slightly. "Plus, no one learns latte art that quickly without some kind of special training." A comfortable silence settled between them, the kind possible only between people who had seen each other's true character under pressure. Outside, the operation was winding down. The bank robbers, except for Diana, were in custody. The tactical team was completing its sweep of the building. News vans lined the perimeter, hungry for details of the dramatic hostage situation and rescue. Sullivan approached, his expression a mix of professional satisfaction and lingering questions. The FBI team has secured the server room and the files. Initial analysis suggests the download was interrupted before the most sensitive information was compromised. And Diana? Mike asked. No sign yet, Sullivan admitted. The ventilation passage led to a maintenance tunnel that connects to the storm drain system. We have teams searching, but a professional like Diana would have prepared multiple escape routes, contingencies for contingencies. Mike knew this with the certainty of someone who had once planned operations with the same thoroughness. She won't be found until she wants to be, he said quietly. Frank Mercer joined them, settling his weathered frame into a chair with a groan. Some coffee would be nice about now, he observed, a gentle attempt at normalcy that made Carol smile. I think we could all use some, she agreed. I'll check if they have any decent beans around here, Mike offered, starting to rise. Carol placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. Not yet. The others are waiting to talk to you first. By others, she meant the collection of officials who had gathered in an adjacent room. FBI leadership, Homeland Security representatives, and others whose jurisdictions overlapped with the complex situation that had unfolded. They have questions about your background, Sullivan explained, about how a coffee shop barista possesses the kind of specialized training and tactical awareness you demonstrated today. Mike nodded, having expected this moment since he first made the decision to retrieve his equipment from the truck. The quiet life he'd built was over, or at least irrevocably changed. Before you go in there, Frank said, leaning forward, you should know I've made some calls. Old colleagues who still have influence. Whatever happens next, you won't be facing it alone. The unexpected support caught Mike off guard. Why would you do that? Frank's expression softened. Because sometimes what's in our official files doesn't tell the whole story. I've watched you for 3 years, seen how you treat people, the care you take with everything you do. That tells me more than whatever happened in Fallujah. Carol looked between them, understanding dawning. So all this time, you knew who Mike really was? I suspected, Frank corrected. Recognized the signs of someone carrying the weight of operations that never officially happened. The rest I pieced together today. Sullivan cleared his throat. They're ready for you now, Porter. Mike stood, squaring his shoulders, the posture of a man preparing to face judgment. Carol rose with him, the coffee beans still clutched in her palm. Whatever happens in there, she said firmly, your job at Oak Ridge Coffee is secure. Some people might need a fresh pot, but I need someone who can make a perfect espresso. The simple acceptance in her voice, the unquestioning offer of continued normalcy despite everything, tightened Mike's throat unexpectedly. Thank you, he managed. As he moved toward the door where officials waited, Sullivan fell into step beside him. For what it's worth, Porter, what you did today saved lives. Not just the hostages, but the informants who would have been compromised. That counts for something in my book. Mike nodded his acknowledgement, then paused before entering. The bank will need a new manager, he noted. Diana's position, already flagged for a full investigation, Sullivan confirmed. Her entire history there will be scrutinized. Good. Mike took a deep breath, then pushed the door open. 2 hours later, he emerged, exhausted but unburdened in a way he hadn't felt in years. The debriefing had been thorough but not accusatory. His actions had been recognized as necessary and effective. His past would remain classified, his present allowed to continue. Carol waited outside, Frank beside her. They had been joined by Sam, who had evaded the police perimeter to bring fresh coffee from a nearby shop. Not as good as yours, Sam said, handing Mike a cup. But it'll do until we can reopen. About that, Mike began, uncertain how to explain everything that had transpired. Carol cut him off with a raised hand. Monday morning, regular time. The special blend for our regular customers. We'll need to order more beans. Just like that, normalcy offered back to him, but with a difference. Now they knew. The weight of secret-keeping lifted, replaced by the lighter burden of being known and accepted anyway. 1 week later, Oak Ridge Coffee reopened. The media frenzy had mostly subsided, though occasionally a customer would ask for the hero barista and seemed disappointed to find just a quiet man making exceptional coffee with precise, careful movements. The new security camera between the coffee shop and bank, installed as part of the updated safety measures, caught Mike's eye as he worked the morning rush, a small reminder of how quickly peace could be disrupted and how vigilance remained necessary even in the most ordinary moments. But when he looked up to find Carol watching him with knowing eyes, or Frank settling into his regular corner table with the day's newspaper, or Sam practicing the latte art techniques Mike had taught him, he found something he hadn't expected to find again after Fallujah. Not just purpose, but belonging. The coffee bean from that day sat on a small shelf behind the counter. A simple reminder that sometimes the most ordinary things could become anchors in the storm. Mike Porter, barista and former operative, counted breaths as he worked the steam wand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect balance. Perfect timing. The man he had been and the man he had become, finally at peace with each other.